I don't think we were always communicating like that. And, as Ryan McCready had said, economic development for a long time was very much like, okay, don't look at my homework.
Right.
But,
Yeah.
which makes sense. So I use he had a lot of good one-liners. So I just store those in my back pocket. But I'll give credit where credit's due. He had a lot of good ones. I'm not that original.
So welcome to the table. Joining us today is Nicole Bateman, president of the Economic Development Corporation of Decatur in Macon County. Good to see you today.
Good to see you guys.
Yeah, thank you for coming today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Excited
one of
to
the
be
things
here.
I don't think I've ever asked you, I know we crossed paths the first time, years ago when I was at the Chamber of Commerce, and I'm curious, did you always envision working in the economic development field?
No, I didn't even know it was a field.
Gotcha.
So
Very good.
I had no idea it existed, but always saw myself in some sort of communication or sales aspect. I love
Okay.
sales, right? And
Yeah.
I love quality communication and PR. And so really that melds really well into economic development. Now there's other aspects of it that I've learned along the way that are super cool. But yeah, it seems like the right fit and kind of along my career pathway and, different experiences I've had, it's all built upon one another and led me here. And it's been a great fit.
Yeah. Now you went to U of I, correct?
I did. Yep.
So maybe share a little bit, if you don't mind, some of the highlights of your personal journey and story that landed you where you are today.
Sure, yeah. So I attended John Wood Community College in Quincy for 2 years and transferred to University of Illinois. I'm the oldest of 4 girls, so my parents saw lots of college and lots of weddings in their future. So John Wood was a great first fit, and I'm a big fan of community colleges. And, in Decatur, we have Richland Community College, and I think they're just doing an outstanding job. So it's fun to... That part kind of comes full circle for me. But attended University of Illinois, majored in ag and environmental communications and education. So it's a mouthful, but basically a lot of non-formal education, communications, and sales training, which was great. So so started there. While I was there, I worked at the country club in Champaign in the office, which I saw as a really great networking opportunity. And then that paid off because one of the members asked if I wanted to come work for their company when I graduated. So stayed in Champaign, was dating my now husband, Mark Bateman, at U of I. And when he graduated, then we were both moving and living in Decatur, which is his hometown. And then just had various experiences working with companies, on the small business purchasing, marketing, at one point business development, became the director of the Children's Museum, which was a cool opportunity.
Really? I forgot about that. Yeah.
So that was, that was cool because that was really a nice opportunity to see this gem in the community. It was, I think, maybe 20 years in when I became the director there, and just really needed to bring it up to speed, right? Kind of with current times, not just the exhibits, but in the processes and staffing and how you operate as an organization and kind of run it more like a business, right? Not just a nonprofit. So did that. It was just getting a ton of attention and a lot of investment, which was exciting. And then the EDC was creating a new position called Community Marketing Manager, funded by the Howard Buffett Foundation for 5 years. And I was approached and asked if I would be interested in that job. And it was kind of funny. Kevin Brahaney and Brian Byers, who are notable Decatur businessmen and talk show radio hosts, asked to meet with me. And I thought, they're going to ask if I want a radio show. And so I go to lunch, I'm just waiting, and they keep talking about this community marketing position, and I thought, the community needs that, right? I think we're primed for growth, but we need an active plan and a marketing plan, and also to kind of help change Decatur's reputation. And so I said, I think that's that'd be awesome. Community needs it. And still, wondering when they're asking me to do the radio show. They didn't ask about that. No, they said, would you be interested in that? I'm like, oh, me? Oh, okay. So I looked into that, interviewed, got that position. That's how I started at the EDC about 8 years ago. 8 years ago this spring. So
was Ryan McCready there then at that time as well?
Yep.
Okay,
so
gotcha.
he had retired from his position as city manager in Decatur and then went to the EDC as president there.
Okay.
And so then, really looking at that from an opportunity to work with him and also with Larry Altenbaumer, who was heading the Midwest Inland Port effort at that time. I thought, okay, what an awesome opportunity for me to take not only the job itself, which really excited me because I felt like that was a good chance to help the community on a larger level, but to get to work with two gentlemen like that had so many experiences and so much knowledge was just really exciting to me, and I'm glad I did because they've been great mentors.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah, I got to know Ryan really when he came over here to run the EDC, and I was still at the chamber, and I hold him in really high regard. He is a really, really solid guy.
Yep, he
and
is.
doing some good things here in our community. So
Yeah.
Cool.
And talk about the inland port and how that's going. I think you gave us a tour. I had a CEO group. We came over and went on a tour. I mean, is that developing? Is it where everybody thought it would be at this point?
It is. So, interestingly enough, I think we maybe oversold it internally, as in when we announced this Midwest Inland Port effort, that people thought warehouses would start popping up immediately.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Those things take time,
yeah,
right?
Exactly. We didn't really communicate that part. Like, hey, this is going to take a minute to develop, right? To really pick up steam, but it certainly has. And so the Midwest Inland Port it's not just one location, but it's how we market ourselves based on our transportation assets. And so you've got, the Class 1 railroads, the uncongested toll-free highway systems, which sounds easy to us because we're used to that, but that's a big deal, right?
Yeah,
when you're thinking about cargo
absolutely.
in these other markets. We have the airport, which has one of the longest runways in downstate Illinois outside of Chicago here. And then the linchpin to making all that work, though, was the ADM intermodal ramp. So you can import and export containers across the globe from Decatur, Illinois. Okay. You don't have to go to Chicago or St. Louis or Indy. You can do all that from Decatur.
Gotcha.
And piggybacking off of ADM's amounts that they send out, which is pretty awesome. And so that really helps a lot of businesses, not only locally, but we use that as a business attraction tool.
Okay.
And so at one point in my career at the EDC, after Larry had retired, I also took on the responsibility of the Midwest Inland Port, marketing and business development. And so we use that as a tool to rope businesses in, because that's another thing that sets us apart as a community in doing business. Now, if some companies, what we're finding is that if some companies may not need to use that, especially the import-export right away, knowing that they can do that when they expand in the future is really critical.
Oh, I can imagine,
because getting in and out of Chicago and containers off of those ramps is really difficult. COVID made
it's going to be like night and day to do it in Decatur versus,
Absolutely, yeah. You can be waiting 8 hours to get a container off the ramp in Chicago. It's 25 minutes in Decatur.
Yeah.
So think how far you can
huge.
be. And a truck drive,
right?
down
the road.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Literally.
Yep.
Yes.
Farther, faster is what we say.
Right. Yeah,
so,
that's awesome.
Yeah, so it's good. So it certainly has developed. I think from my perspective, it has developed as we thought it would. Mm-hmm. Now, from the general public perspective in Decatur, right? Like I was getting my tires changed one day, and the gentleman who owned the shop was like, that Midwest Inland Port thing was quite the bust. I'm like, no, actually it wasn't. Which then told me, okay, we should probably do some more marketing and communications around this internally. But these, economic development is, as Ryan McCready would say, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah. Sure.
And so, it's certainly doing what we expected it to do. And it's been a real benefit, not just to the businesses in Decatur, but there's cargo coming in and out of the Dakotas, in and out of Decatur, because they want to avoid those larger ramps, right? So it's really a whole Midwest play. And that's another opportunity to work, regionally to bring in companies, because we have that asset here.
Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned the internal marketing to the community itself. It's an interesting dynamic that I think a lot of people don't think about that's really necessary. People have these long-standing thoughts and images of their community that may or may not be true. And the need to market to ourselves, if you will, as you're trying to attract others to come to the community is really a pretty big deal. I may have this wrong, but didn't you guys do the campaign, and maybe you still do it, called, is it Limitless Decatur? Yeah, yep. I remember that. And I know Ryan's doing a similar kind of internal marketing here in Sangamon County. And a lot of people don't think about those things.
No, they don't. And we're seeing more of it now. And I will say we were probably on the forefront of that, because that's what I was hired to do, was to launch that Limitless campaign. So 8 years ago, and before that, the community realized there was an initiative called Grow Decatur, and it was a grassroots initiative, and we just had a lot of working groups of community leaders and volunteers that identified these priorities for the community. One of them was Midwest Inland Port, right, to strengthen our transportation hub. The second one that rose to the top was a Lake Decatur dredging project, so we could have more water
you talk about
capacity.
that.
Yep, which was huge.
And that's done, right? Correct.
That's done.
Yeah,
Yep.
right, yeah.
So that, and then a few other things, but one of the other top ones was community marketing and internal perception change, because we knew, and this is not unique to Decatur, but in this region may be a little unique to Decatur. There were so many good things happening, but nobody was talking about it. And once I got into the role and I started talking to folks really intentionally about their thoughts about the community, and what I was noticing was a lot of their stories, or if they had a negative perception about one particular topic, it was from something that was 20 years ago.
Right.
And I don't say just 20 years, pick a number. It really was from 20 years ago. And I thought, well, there's been good things that have happened since then, and things are happening, but we weren't talking about it, right?
Those
So it kind of comes back to
leave
the
a mark,
communication.
and then it becomes this perception becomes reality for folks. Yeah,
Exactly. And so we have really, we were fortunate to receive funding from the Buffett Foundation for the first 5 years of that campaign, and just made very significant strides. And we measured that. So we would send out community perception surveys every few years, so we can mark, how people were feeling about the community. And then we also asked them in that, how long have you lived here? Have you lived anywhere else? Have you, and I think what we found at least, was that the folks that had lived there the longest and never lived anywhere else had the most negative perception. Right. But that kind of makes sense, right? If you haven't seen that the grass actually isn't greener somewhere else, or perhaps it is, but that makes sense to us, but still their voices are there, and they're heard, and sometimes they can be really loud. And so we need to find a way to make sure that we're all kind of seeing, all aspects of the community. And especially in the past 5 years, we've just seen a tremendous amount of growth, not just on the economic development front, but especially on the quality of life front. I mean, between the Decatur Park District and others and our surrounding communities, you think about Mount Zion and Forsyth and all the cool things they're doing within their own villages. There's just a lot going on. But, being the communications and PR major in me, if we're not talking about it, nobody's going to know about it. And so it's just, it's just really important, I think, as communities, no matter where you are, talk about it. It's okay to pat yourself on the back. It's okay. People have to hear that message over and over before it registers. And then they need to keep hearing it before they believe it. And that's really important for community growth.
So the Buffett Foundation, I mean, me living in Springfield now, when I go back there and I see all the things that they've done, from the police training center and some of the, can you talk about the things that are going on that he's involved in, or the foundation is involved in?
Yeah, I mean, not speaking on behalf of the foundation, of course, but there have been, I think for many years, there were a lot of quiet investments, because generally he doesn't seem to want to have his name on it, right? Happy to donate to it, but he names them after somebody that has, been influential to him. So like, for example, one of the most recent investments that I was happy to be a part of in developing was the Andreas Ag Academy. He named that after Dwayne Andreas. He didn't name it after himself, right? Because Dwayne was an influence on his life.
And that's at
the Decatur Public School District.
Okay.
And so that's another, again, there were so many opportunities that we thought, okay, there's opportunity here for us to create this incredible ag academy, because we are in the middle of the biggest ag commerce business in the world. And we didn't have any formal ag programming in our largest public high school. And so we're taking care of that now. I think there's almost 500 kids enrolled in that academy.
Oh, that's outstanding.
It's amazing.
Yeah, that's great.
Amazing. But so we, so there's programmatic things like that the Buffett Foundation has donated to and helped fund. But then there's others like the training academies on the south side of Decatur, which are just fantastic and top notch. And just last week they had a grand opening for the ICAT building. And so the intent there between ICAT and then McLetzie and the other training facilities is that they bring in law enforcement, first responders, and others from all over, locally, but really all over the state from McLetzie. And now really with the ICAT training building, which is centered on de-escalation tactics for law enforcement. That's set up for officers from all over the country.
Is that right?
Really all over the world to come train in.
Is that right? That's awesome.
Yep. So we're going to have, so when we think of that from a community perspective, our hotels are going to be even more full than they already are, right?
yeah,
We have a
sure.
lot of people coming in, from a weekly basis just on that business travel. But to have that sustainability through just that programming alone, if you have 60 training a week, I mean, that's 60 beds and heads, or heads and beds,
Yeah, heads and beds,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right.
So
And how about
presents
that?
just another
And the
cool
Devon
opportunity.
Theater is amazing.
It's
I went to
beautiful.
a concert last year. I mean,
cool.
that is, a gorgeous setting, and what a cool thing for Decatur, right?
Definitely, yeah. So that that was an example of, I believe that the state had promised funding, and then it just never
Yeah.
came through, and we were ready to build it, and then the Buffett Foundation came in and graciously finished that out for us. So it's called the Devon G. Buffett, or the Devon Buffett Amphitheater.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So after his wife, right? Again,
that's
doesn't want to
really
name
cool.
himself. So really, just super, super generous to the Decatur and surrounding communities. I can confidently say I don't think it would look quite like it does today without his support of the community,
Without
and
a
that
doubt.
says a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah,
Yeah, so it's pretty cool. But
Yeah.
just really neat, really neat developments on that end, and then of course, so that's on the south end of town. Primarily the things that you can see, the actual structures and buildings. But then we got a lot going on the northeast side too, in our industrial corridor.
Okay. So can you share any of that?
I can,
Okay.
yeah. So,
Well,
so there's a couple. So there's some I
what
can
we wanna
tell
hear
you,
about.
and So some things I can talk about. The things that are in the pipeline we can't quite talk about, but it's just exciting to see this full pipeline, right?
Sure.
And everything we've been working for, talking about, and marketing that Midwest Inland Port for years and years and years, and then the pandemic hits, and all the projects just kind of come to a screeching halt. The ones that had long-term global economic, impact plans or sustainability focus around them were the ones that picked up again right away. Others that were very trendy in nature, the pandemic killed some of those.
Sure.
Fortunately, before the pandemic started, though, we were working with this company called Innova Feed, and now they have finally broke ground, right, on their first plant. So one of those projects, Innova Feed, it's an insect protein plant.
Okay.
So not for human consumption right now. Their target market at the moment is they'll grow insect protein for the swine, the aquaculture industry,
Okay.
poultry
Interesting.
industry as well. So it's a high protein additive that you can add to their livestock feed.
Sure.
And it's interesting because they're more of a tech company than they are a bug company, if you will. But it's super fascinating. And so this is their first facility outside of France.
Okay.
Is that right?
Yep,
Wow.
Yep, and they've expanded here. So it's partnering with ADM and have purchased some land just north of ADM there, if you're familiar with Brush College Road and Hubbard or Raised Bridges,
Yes.
right there. So
Okay.
there you've got that, which was great. And then, and that was a unique project because sometimes we get projects that come to us through, let's say, the state of Illinois or through Intersect Illinois, or they just kind of call at random. Sometimes we don't get to meet the company owners or know much about the project until they get to kind of a selection phase. Well, this opportunity, we were introduced to Innova Feed very early on in the process by their contacts at ADM.
Okay.
And
So would they have been touring other cities? Or,
Yes.
Oh, they were. So,
They were.
All
that-
connected to ADM?
not all connected to ADM,
Okay.
but we were able to build such a trusting relationship with them that I had said to them, listen, I know you're going to get proposals. They were looking in Nebraska as well. I said, I know you're going to get proposals from other states and other cities. If you wouldn't mind, I'd like to see them because I know you're a foreign company and you're not familiar with our tax structures or other things, right? I just want to make sure. And at this point, I really got to like these folks, right? So I wanted what was best for them.
Yeah.
And if Decatur wasn't it, I mean, clearly we want them here, but I just wanted them to make a really informed decision. And as I suspected, when they got their proposals from some of the other states, they were not apples to apples. And so we were able to kind of help guide them through and then also identify where the gaps are. So we could be a little more customizable in our approach for, companies, yes, they're looking for incentives, but they're really looking for a partner. And so I think that's where we've positioned our community really well is we'll be your partner through this. And not just after you say yes to coming here, we're going to make sure you get, built and in production and you get the workforce you need. That's really, I think, that where the value is for these companies because as you both know in your experience, Decatur's very, very much values relationships.
Correct, yeah.
And I've taken that same, and I do as well. And I've taken that same approach to working with all of our projects, right? All of our potential projects, all of our companies that are expanding in Decatur, whatever the project may be, if they don't feel that they have a partner in that, they're not going to be confident in investing their money there.
Good point.
Right.
Yeah.
So, or I should say here. So we want them here. And so that was a really great opportunity to be able to work with Innovafeed off of the very, start of their project. They made the announcement to come to Decatur in the middle of the pandemic, and then they physically couldn't get here because they couldn't fly to America, right? So that was an interesting project, and just the amount of time that it has taken them to really start getting up and running. But they did a groundbreaking in January. I said, you might want to wait till March, January in Decatur, Illinois for a groundbreaking. Seems
a little chilly.
Really chilly, yeah. But go for it. They had, I think it was 60 degrees that day and sunny. It was just gorgeous. So they're on their way.
So they broke ground and
Yep.
construction.
And they're working with O'Shea Builders here out of
I was going to ask. I
Springfield.
think I remember talking to Tyler Cormany about this
I remember.
project. The bugs or what?
Yes.
Yeah, that's
Yep.
awesome.
The bug
Made me
plan.
remember. Yeah.
So they're working together. So that's another fun part of my job too, is helping to make introductions and connections. Right.
Yep.
So the more they can be connected and build those relationships, I think the more chance of success they're going to have. And so that's a big part of the job too, is just connecting dots and making those connections. Another cool projects that we have recently announced, they're making some final investment decisions right now, but on exactly what that will look like. But LG Chemical, so they'll partner with ADM as well. ADM is going to produce lactic acid and then feed it to the polylactic acid that LG Chem will make. Okay, so I was not a chemistry major.
You're speaking a foreign language.
I don't know what a follow-up question to that would even be.
No, that's okay. So LG Chem has created a technology to make a biodegradable plastic bottle that biodegrades, in, I'm going to get this wrong, but let's say 7 months instead of 70 years.
Gotcha.
So it's a new technology that they've created and patented. So they're going to now make the plastics for that in Decatur.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So they can ramp that up here, which is cool. And then.
So are these companies, or once the facility's built and they're up and running, does it produce a lot of jobs?
It does.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So they come in with some figures, and then that will kind of ebb and flow a little bit until they get to the final, the final finish line there and hiring. But hundreds and then hundreds more and hundreds more. And usually what we're seeing is they'll have phase 1, phase 2, or maybe phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 projections. Yeah. And so at the phase 1, almost all of them are at least 100 jobs.
Well, that's great.
And then
That's awesome.
go up from there. And, at peak, they're saying, a lot of them are saying between 600 and 1,000.
Well, that's outstanding.
So that's a lot per company.
Oh, yeah.
And, you look down the list, and that's a lot of companies that those are two.
Sure.
But then you've got ADM, which is constantly expanding and investing, right? So they opened an aquaculture center. They're putting $300 million into an alternative proteins expansion and new center there. It's really unbelievable.
That is.
Yeah. So it's exciting. And then you've got the whole carbon sequestration aspect, which is a tool that you just can't have just anywhere in the United States, and we've got it, and it's proven technology. So that's another business attraction tool. It's just a lot going on.
Can you say more about that?
Sure.
And part of why I'm curious is, being in Springfield, following what's going on at City Water, Light and Power, and I know they're doing a carbon capture project, I think through U of I, if I remember correctly. And so I'm just kind of curious about this space.
Yeah, so U of I partnered with ADM about 10 years ago. And maybe the U.S. Geological Society and other governmental agencies to test carbon sequestration. So basically, you're capturing the CO2 off of a plant. So let's say like ADM's ethanol plant. So a process that would produce CO2.
Right.
So instead of just emitting that into the atmosphere, they capture it and liquefy it, and then they push it way underground.
Correct.
Miles, right? So not where it would ever come up again. But they started this process 10 years ago to see if that technology would work. And we've proven that it does work. It goes there, it's stable. And so, but you have to have a special geological formation under you for that to work. And in kind of mid-central Illinois down into Indiana and Kentucky, I think into Kentucky and all of southern Illinois, we're in what we call the Mount Simon Sandstone Basin. And so there is just layer after layer after layer of rock. Again, I wasn't a geologist either, but I learned a lot through the process. But I can communicate just enough to be dangerous. Where they're able to drill, so they liquefy it and then they drill it and through these wells and just push it way underground, and then it just sits there for eternity.
Unbelievable,
really. So instead of pushing it out into the environment, they're able to capture it and push it underground. Now that's important, especially as government agencies like EPA and others are starting to really dial in the amount of emissions that companies can produce. So the companies have to find a way to capture that carbon or to eliminate it or reduce it in their processes. Well, being able to capture it and then store it is one way that they can do that. And we can do that in Decatur, Illinois. So that is attracting businesses as well. A lot of businesses are becoming more sustainable, right? Or have a real key segment of their business that has to be more sustainable. And this is one way to help those companies get there. So again, it's kind of that partnership I was referring to. Like, we can be a partner of yours on this because we have these assets that you're not going to find anywhere else. And you have a great partner in ADM too, because they've proven this technology and the expertise is here. And we've actually started a carbon sequestration certification program, and not just certification program, like a degree at Richland Community College.
Is that right?
Yeah. So we have a whole National Carbon Sequestration Education Center in Decatur to come visit. So if somebody's curious about how that technology works, I encourage them to stop by. But again, it's all this cool stuff that's happening that, again, if we don't talk about it, people aren't going to know.
Nobody knows.
Right. But I think it's important too for our region to understand all the assets, not only that Decatur has, but that our other regional communities have. And we've started to really work together more, I would say, in the past 3 or 4 years than we had ever worked together before, at least from the EDC perspective. So I work really closely with Ryan here in Springfield, Chris Setti in Peoria, Patrick Hoban in Bloomington, Carly McKay in Champaign, and then Brian Moody over in Tuscola. So it's kind of, the 6 of us are working really closely together on how do we position the Central Illinois region for economic growth, because we know when companies are looking for a location, they're not looking like, okay, am I going to go to Springfield or am I going to go to Decatur? They're like, find me a location east of the Mississippi and west of Ohio or west of whatever, So that's the region they're looking at. So our theory is, well, if we can attract them to our Central Illinois region, then they're going to land where they should land, right? And then it's up to us to individually sell, but let's just work to attract them here.
What kind of challenges do you face being that we're in Illinois? Is that an issue or not?
I think it depends on the business. But what we're finding is there are a lot of things in Illinois that you're just not going to have somewhere else, right? It's the things you can't replicate, like Chicago. Like our GDP that comes out of the state, our transportation network, the Midwest work ethic. Right? I mean, that makes sense. When you talk about the Southeast or the South, you don't have, it's not the same. And that's something that you just can't replicate. The education systems we have, right? University of Illinois graduates more engineers than MIT and Caltech. It's like things like that, that once a company says, I'm interested in Illinois, once we can provide all that information too, and you don't just look at it, Illinois reminds me a little bit of Decatur and the fact that it's like, well, if you just keep talking about the bad, then all people are going to hear is that, right? So we got to start turning that around. So like at least locally in Decatur, we're talking about the good because there's a lot of good stuff happening. I think there is an effort on the state level to be doing the same thing. So you've got organizations like Intersect Illinois that are doing that, right? And you have to be bold. You have to get out there and you have to tell your story. And they're starting to do that. And I think that's starting to yield real results. We do attract a ton of businesses in Illinois every year. But again, it's easier to get caught up in the political landscape and not talk about that and just argue about stuff instead of talking about our successes.
Or talk about the businesses that are leaving versus the ones that are coming. The ones that have been attracted.
Because we hear that a lot.
We do hear that a lot. We hear that a lot. But the rate of leaving versus attracting is not balanced. Right? We're attracting more than we're losing.
That's good. So that's good to know. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit, because I think folks are really curious about the economic development field, like the process of attracting somebody to Decatur or Central Illinois, how that process works. Can you
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple of different I'll say maybe like pipes in which projects come in. So you've got, you might get a project through Intersect Illinois, which is the business development arm of the state of Illinois that is kind of independent. Well, it was independent from the government. Now I think it's kind of roped in under the governor's arm again, which is great and fine, because then I think honestly there's more funding there, which is good. But they will work with site selectors. So companies may hire consultants to go out and find locations for them so that they can keep their company name anonymous, right? So they can go about it that way. And then oftentimes they'll work with Intersect Illinois, or they'll work with the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. Okay. So DCEO. Yeah. Because, government loves acronyms. So we got Intersect and DCEO. So they'll come through maybe those pipelines. Now, those projects are interesting because they always give them a code name, right? So like Project Fab or Project something. And we may know, they may then say, okay, it's a foreign manufacturing company that wants to make electric vehicle batteries, something. Yeah. Or they may say nothing, but here's all the electrical requirements, water, they need rail, they need this, and this. And we fill out kind of this blind RFP. We fill out these spreadsheets and we send them off, and then we just hope we make it to the next round.
Right.
So you've got that, those pipelines that can come in that way. Then you have, we do a lot of outbound and very targeted marketing for the industries that we know will do well in Decatur. We're not going to turn any business away, and we're not going to turn any industry away, but we know certain industries would really succeed here in the region and specifically in Decatur. And so we do a lot of target marketing there. And then we also have just really been intentional about building relationships with our existing companies. And I will say ADM is a key example of that. Yeah. So when projects or companies come to ADM, or they're working with a company, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to land in Decatur. So for LG Chem, for instance, we were competing for LG Chem to land in Decatur against ADM's Iowa locations, Iowa locations, right? And others as well. So just because the relationship might be there doesn't mean that they're going to land in Decatur. We still have to compete at a local and a state level to get them to say yes to Decatur. Gotcha. But having formed the relationships there, and I think built the trust with the folks at ADM over the years, where they can say, okay, EDC, this is happening. What incentives do you have? Why should they be in Decatur? Really bringing us into the fold much earlier in the process, I think has helped us been more successful in landing those projects that we've seen recently, which is exciting. So we get those. Occasionally we'll get a random call from somebody who's interested in Decatur. They're working with a company out of Florida and they want to come here, whatever. We'll get those too. Those are fewer and far between, but
How's the EDC funded?
So we're funded by contributions through community companies. Okay. So they all pay a certain amount based on their employee head count. Okay. And those are the ones that contribute to our organization, and then they sit on our board of directors.
Okay, gotcha.
Also, we are funded additionally by the city of Decatur, Villages of Mount Zion and Forsyth, and the Decatur Park District. Okay. But the rest are private companies.
All private donors.
Like
so
we
ADM.
have 17. Yep. So ADM, Caterpillar, O'Shea, the hospital. Yeah. Yep. Memorial Hospital.
Okay, cool.
Yep. And others. So and a good mix of different types of companies. But I'll tell you what, we have a fantastic board that is really. They're really, driven by knowing what Decatur can become. And a lot of them have had longevity, at least in their region. Sure. So they see it, they get it, and they're supportive of driving the community forward. And it's just really fun to be in on those conversations.
Yeah, it's great to be around people who are willing to envision what the future can look like, and then they're willing to put their money behind it to help make it happen.
Well, and exactly. And you think about it too. I mean, a lot of our board members, they'll get the secondary or the third benefits from landing a company. Right. Many of them don't get a direct benefit because they're not a taxing body. They're private companies. But, the more people we can bring into the community and more companies we bring in, perhaps the more customers that they'll get, or the relationship they can form, or they just generally love Decatur and Macon County, and they want to support it. And this is a really good way to do it. So that's how we're funded.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. So the Demersions, obviously, I see them a lot on social media. The growth that they've experienced. Do they have anything new going on in Decatur with their
They do.
organizations?
They do. Yep. And so
Because they're kind of a quiet company in a lot of ways, because we talk about ADM all the time.
It is, yep. But we have a lot of really awesome small companies, and
Yeah.
TCCI and DCC Marketing are two of those, both with the Demersion families, but TCCI in particular. So they're a global company, right? Like
Yep.
a lot of our small companies
Yeah.
in Decatur, they're a global company.
Yeah.
And so they are going to transition their factory in Decatur from making compressors to electric compressors for the electric vehicle market.
Okay.
They were positioned to do this at one of their plants overseas, and they said, we would really like to do this in Illinois, but we got to make it work, right? We got to find it. It has to work, and that's the decision a lot of global companies face is, can we do it cheaper over here? Sure, but if the pandemic taught us anything about supply chain issues, and then specifically with electric vehicles and the rapid rate in which that market is growing, can you afford to build overseas, or does it make more sense to build it in America?
Yeah.
And so they are completely overhauling their facility here.
Wow.
They will stop production of that line and rebuild their factory and start making the electric vehicle compressors
Impressive.
here
Wow.
in Decatur, Illinois.
Wow,
It's
that's
awesome.
pretty
Cool.
awesome.
How long of
Yeah.
a turnaround will that take to,
Oh,
in essence,
maybe
really
realistically,
switch up their production completely? It sounds like.
probably 2 years or less, maybe less than that. I mean, they'll move as fast as they can, right? Because they'll have orders to fill and they'll be ready to go. Just thinking of general construction timelines, it always just takes a bit, right? Especially when you're overhauling a gigantic plant like that. But I mean, I think it's going to happen. It'll be done before we know it.
That's
really.
terrific.
Yeah, it's
that's
super
pretty cool.
exciting. Yeah, it's great to see that investment here. And I think that's an example from a local family, a local company that is global, that had those options, that said, no, you know what, we really want to invest in Illinois, because the EV market too is a focus of the current administration, but really Illinois is really primed to receive a lot of that. So if we can start building this cluster, right? So you've got Rivian up in Bloomington. Now we've got the electric compressors being made in Decatur. There are other Decatur companies who wish to remain anonymous, but they are also doing work in the EV space.
Okay.
So it's like, it's here.
Sure.
And now how can we build upon that? So the more we tell their story, sometimes companies don't want to be the first to do it and the first in a regional market to do it. Well, now we've got multiple examples of companies that are doing work in the EV space, and they're successful here. So
I mean, has Rivian just like blown up Bloomington? I mean, has it been a huge windfall for them?
it has been, and for our regions too. One of our largest warehouses is full of Rivian parts.
Oh,
Is that
really?
right?
Yeah.
Well,
so
that is, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So most
cool.
people don't.
Yeah,
right? 'Cause
exactly.
it's
Right.
I mean,
Well, and you're not that far, so it makes sense, right?
And so it's not, the warehouse isn't Rivian branded, but when they advertise for employees, it's the Rivian warehouse in Decatur, you know? So it's interesting. But yeah, I mean, that has those types of big projects. That's why I think working regionally is so important, because a win for Bloomington Normal is a win for Decatur,
Yeah.
is
For
a win
all
for
of Central
Springfield. And
Illinois.
because we all share a workforce too.
Yeah.
Sure.
Because, you can, you
yeah.
can drive an hour
Absolutely.
for
Yes.
work, and there's no
Yeah.
traffic and no tolls,
Right.
and it's not a headache, and
Yeah.
people will do that. So then when you look at it, while Decatur's population might be upwards of, 70,000 you add in the county, you're getting close to over 110. But when you look at our labor force and our drive, you're 500,000 people.
Right.
Yeah.
And everybody, all of our communities can claim that. And as you get closer to Peoria, the numbers are probably even larger.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I agree.
that's, something I think we lose sight of, but
Yeah.
you really think about that. That's,
I think
that's
until
what
people do it, they really do lose sight of that.
Yeah.
I mean, we're back and forth to Decatur,
Yeah.
between Decatur and
A lot,
Springfield
yeah.
all the time.
All the time,
And
yeah.
Champaign to St. Louis.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got crews of folks all over the place
Right.
Yep.
in any given day.
Yeah.
Yep.
It just depends on where the work is and what's taking place. So,
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear that you guys do communicate, because we do business in Champaign, Bloomington, St. Louis, some in Peoria as well, and then of course Decatur, Springfield. But I would go to a Chamber of Commerce luncheon or dinner in Champaign or in Bloomington, and it's like we were all talking about the same things, but I didn't know that we did communicate with each other because
We are.
I feel like it's Chicago and then us down here.
Yeah.
So that's good to hear.
Yeah. Well, in I don't think we were always communicating like that. And as Ryan McCready had said, economic development for a long time was very much like, okay, don't look at my homework.
Right.
But which makes sense. So I use he had a lot of like good one-liners. So I just like store those in my back pocket. But I'll give credit where credit's due. He had a lot of good ones. I'm not that original. But I think it's important because really, if you look at all those communities you just mentioned, we're all very different, and our economic engines are very different from one another.
Right.
So that in itself, when you look at us as a region, let's just say we were one big city, and you pile all those companies and all those economic drivers into one city,
Right.
we would be a Chicago.
Right.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
There's nothing we don't have.
Correct.
Yeah.
We have it. We have the tech.
Yep.
We have the medical. We have the manufacturing. We have the academics. We have
All of it. Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
I think we just have to change our mindsets. And I will say the leaders of our EDCs now have done that. Well, it helps that 3 of the 6 of us are from Decatur and have all worked together at one point, right?
Yeah.
So that building, that relationship of trust was there.
Sure.
But the others knew each other as well, and then it all makes sense.
I
and we
forgot
get
about
it.
Patrick being part of that.
Yeah.
And he's you said Peoria or
Bloomington
that's
Normal,
right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Good for him.
So it's been fun to see all of that really come together. And I'll tell you what, that's the pandemic, did a lot of things, good and bad. One of the good things that came out of that was this regional approach and this regionalism, because economic development is a unique industry. Again, one that I didn't even know existed. But our challenges as economic development leaders during the pandemic were really unique, and it was hard to explain that to somebody else, but the 6 of us got it, right?
Yeah.
We understood what each other was going through. And so that in itself kind of brought us closer together as a team, if you will. And now that we're all kind of on the other side of that and we're all just growing and going gangbusters, it's nice that we can share in each other's successes honestly, and then work together to really market the region for growth. And so that when somebody is sitting in Chicago, they don't forget about Central Illinois, or when the state is sending projects out, they understand what assets that they have right here in the middle of the state to send projects our way, so that they can win. Right? If we can make the state feel like they're going to win, that's important too, right? And I think we're doing that, because if they bring us a project and we can win, we will build it, and they will be successful, and we'll have more people, and everybody wins.
Yeah, that's terrific. I like it.
Yeah. Well, I would say that, again, a lot of folks don't have any idea about the industry of economic development. But I think there are a lot of folks who are grateful for folks like you, Ryan, the others in the communities of Central Illinois who are working together. Because I think we've got a lot more assets in Central Illinois to offer to folks than a lot of people ever realize.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And without your voices, I don't think that happens. So
Well, thanks. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's fun. It's a fun career to be in.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us today.
thank you for
It's
coming.
been good to have you.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah,
You guys
good
keep up the
catching
great
up.
work. We appreciate everything you do and the way you get back to the communities that we're in. It really means a lot.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.